everybody. Very happy to be live with Brian Price. Second time in a row as well. We normally swap hosts, Brian, for you.
Yes. Nice to see you again, Kaz.
Do you want to start us off with an introduction to yourself and your books?
Well, the latest book is called Fatal Hate. It's a sequel to Fatal Trade. That's the Fatal Hate. Featuring largely the same characters. In particular, DC Mel Cotton, who's the brave, clever, witty, and doughty DC, who's not long been in CID and is very keen to prove herself because her parents were both in the police service. And she's got the usual people with her: Tom Ferris, who she's now going out with, Sergeant Jack Vaughan, who despairs of her being a bit impetuous sometimes. And it all starts off with the discovery of a warehouse worker, an admin guy, in an alleyway with a wound on his head where someone's hit him with some concrete. And the first question is, why would anybody bother to bump off a fairly innocuous warehouse worker? And so when the team start looking into that, they find that maybe his racist mates turned on him for some reason. Maybe he saw something he shouldn't. And it then gets deeper and deeper into things like smuggling, right-wing terrorism, and revenge from a young woman who's determined to seek justice on the men who she holds responsible for her sister's suicide. And coupled to that, there's some very unpleasant goings on with some local councillors and other notables. And the team have to get involved with that. And the whole thing sort of converges to a fairly shocking climax. And that's basically it. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give away any spoilers. But people in the initial reviews seem to rather like it.
It's a good read. We've got some hellos from Tony and someone who's coming up as Facebook user. So I'll see if I can see who it is. Tell us a little bit about the research you do, because I know you're like super knowledgeable about the science and everything like that. But what about, you've gone into sort of those really, really like far right people and what they do. What kind of research did you have to do for that?
Well, there's a certain amount of stuff. Just seeing the papers, the kind of things which go on with the anti-vaxxers, with the people attacking nurses and doctors, claiming there's no such thing as COVID. And I came across a thing which I quote at the end of the book, that a few years ago, MI5 reported that about 30% of the terrorist attacks they stopped before it actually turned into an attack were right-wing terrorism. And I've been aware from the papers for a while that it's not just the Islamic fundamentalists, the left wing, if you like, terrorists who are causing problems. It's other parts of the political spectrum as well. So that was one aspect of it. There is an explosive device, which I won't go into any details about for obvious reasons. That's the kind of thing I learned about when I was a kid, and anything more, I'll need a solicitor. What else did I have to research? I think, a bit about hacking groups. I had to look into those, and computer hacking generally, so I had to find out a little bit about that. And of course, one of the things which is very important, I feel, is to get the police procedures right. Now, you can't be absolutely perfect because it takes a long, long time, for instance, to get toxicology results back. And post-mortems aren't done in the afternoon when the corpse is found in the morning. So you do have to telescope timescales a little bit for the purpose of PACE. But the other version of PACE, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, you need to get that kind of thing right. And of course, Graham Bartlett is an amazing source of information and guidance on that. I've done a couple of workshops with him and Kate Bendelow for writers. He does police procedure, Kate does the forensic evidence gathering, and I do the sort of sciencey bits. So I learned an awful lot from just hearing him do that. And he very kindly looked over the manuscript as well and pointed out a few errors about things. There are a couple of things in there which aren't quite right, but wouldn't be necessary to change. It might derail things a bit. But yes, getting that right, I think, is quite important. It's got to be credible. But you don't want to go on for days and days as, you know, so and so looked up this on the computer and looked up that and asked these questions, because there's a huge amount of paperwork, and crimes aren't cracked in 50 minutes like on the television.
You make an appearance in an upcoming release, don't you, by Mr. Craven for your advice that you give to
Yes.
authors?
Yeah. Well, I gave Mike a couple of hints on the poison side of The Botanist, which is it's an absolutely superb book. It really is worth getting as soon as it, you know, comes out. It's great stuff. And yes, he put me in there as a police officer who thumps somebody for domestic abuse or beating up his girlfriend or something. So at least I was there on the, you know, the right side of the divide, if you like, not there as a criminal.
I know. Well, it was a nice surprise coming across your name.
Yes, and for me, I didn't know he was going to do it.
So, tell us a little bit more about your main characters in the series. We've got Mel, who's like the main sort of
Mel is the sort of central character, but I mean, no police investigation is based on just one person. She happens to be. Many people find her an engaging central character, so a lot of it is around her. But she has Tom Ferris, who's now her boyfriend. I hope that's not giving away too much for people who haven't read Fatal Trade. And they're living together with parrots. You've got Sergeant Jack Vaughan, who's he was her sort of mentor, and she does take a few risks. And he has this theme about, you know, you've only got 9 lives, Mel, and how many have you lost now? And although he does respect her, he does think she's very good, but he feels he ought to sort of restrain her a little bit. DC Fiona Gale is now a DCI, following events in the previous book. And the senior investigating officer is Inspector Emma Thorpe, who's from Yorkshire, transferred down to the imaginary town of Mexton in the south for a quiet life, and suddenly finds it's far from quiet, because apart from the murder, a couple of our officers are nearly burned to death. There's a hitman in town, and all kinds of and the explosive device, of course, which features on the front of the book. So it's far from a quiet life, and she rises to the challenge. One character which a couple of people in reviews quite like is a guy called Robbie. He's a hacker, but a white hat hacker. And he hit on the device, and I don't think it's giving away too much, of sending an email out, or setting up a fake paedophile site, which didn't actually have anything illegal on it. But when people clicked on a particular link, their computers automatically sent a message to the local police station saying, "I'm a paedophile, come and arrest me," which I wish somebody could do, actually. I don't know if it's technically feasible. So he joins in and he helps with various aspects of the investigation. And then we have the young woman whose sister died. She was effectively forced to commit suicide, and she becomes, among other things, a hacking expert. And I don't think I want to say too much more, other than the fact that she'll do anything to get revenge. And I think most people will be very much on her side, even though what she does at times is illegal. So I don't think I'd better say any more about her.
No.
Or some of the other characters who are peripherally involved, well, more than peripherally involved, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I was going to ask you about Robbie. I thought he was quite entertaining. Donna has said she loved the running joke throughout about the 9 lives, but she's run out by the end of the book. I also like
she's got a couple left for the next book, so she'll be all right.
I like your running joke about the Grateful Dead t-shirt.
Oh, yes. Well, I think if someone is injured and is bleeding or something, or the police do have a kind of store of lost property, which they will lend somebody if they need some clothing immediately. If someone's clothes are gathered for forensic testing, for instance, they can't send them home without any clothes, so they lend them something. And it just occurred to me that having something from the sort of hippie era of the Grateful Dead being worn by police officers who've had nosebleeds, and that would be quite amusing. So it crops up, yes.
Yeah, it's quite it's kind of one of those funny running jokes that you can imagine would really happen.
Yes, I think police officers do like jokes. They take the mickey out of each other, um, play practical jokes and so on. I just read a book called Girl Cop by Sandy Osborne. I think it's a sort of semi-autobiographical thing about a young woman joining Bath CID in the 1990s and facing appalling sexism. And it describes some of the practical jokes which officers played on each other. And in the case of her, because of a particularly unpleasant individual, it went too far. And, you know, coupled with the sexism and the misogyny and the racism, which was about in some individuals, by no means all, in those days, she had a fairly miserable time at the beginning, but, you know, worked on through. So I believe a lot of those things are based on this, the author's own personal experience in CID in the 1990s. Actually, no, it wasn't CID, it was Beat Cop. Yeah, it was Beat Cop. So yeah, jokes are like any profession where you're in danger a lot of the time. There is a certain amount of black humor and trying to, well, gallows humor to defuse it, whether it's paramedics or soldiers. One of my fellow authors, Lewis Hastings, fellow Hobeck authors, was criticised for some of the banter going on between some military figures there. And he pointed out that whoever made that comment had never been under fire and never had the need to try and make light of thoroughly grim situations.
Yeah, maybe. I think you're right. There is a lot of that kind of humor in.
Yeah. And if you look at Stuart McBride's books, he has a lot of humour in there, which kind of not dilutes but mitigates some of the really grisly things which go on. His writing can be grim but absolutely hilarious.
So Donna's asked a good question, and I'm going to read it because I think it's a good time for you to mention your competition as well.
Ah, yes.
She said she'd love to know about the Easter eggs. Why did you decide to do that? And did you have an idea of what you wanted to include, and was it difficult to do?
Well, I thought I quite like the things mentioned in my website. I think that in the Endeavour TV series, there's they plant these little Easter eggs, little references. There is usually a picture or a reference to Colin Dexter, who wrote the original Morse books, which spawned the series. They mention in one of them, Inspector Thursday refers to Sergeant Vimes of Cable Street, which is from Terry Pratchett. And there's a Clint Eastwood quote from a Dirty Harry film. You know, I expect you're wondering, did I fire 5 or did I fire 6? Do you feel lucky? And he quotes that. And there's a signpost to Midwich, a village made up by John Wyndham for his novel, The Midwich Cuckoos. And I'm sure there are plenty more which I've missed. And I think if you look at the Shrek films, there are dozens and dozens of them as well. So these kind of things kind of intrigued me. And as the book was due to be published round about Easter, I thought, well, why not include them? But there should be a prize. My next book is going to be called Fatal Dose, and it's about a serial poisoner. So how about some kind of spoof toxic chocolates thing, maybe drawing on the Monty Python sketch where you had chocolates called Crunchy Frog and Spring Surprise, which had springs that sprang out when you ate them and that. So perhaps these ideas sort of coalesced, and we have a very good chocolatier here in Weston-super-Mare. And my daughter came up with the picture for the box. I don't know how much you can see, but it's by Maybrick and Cream, which is the chocolate company I mentioned in the book. 6 flavors to die for, chocolates you'll never forget. And they include things like Strychnine Surprise, Belladonna Cream, Cyanide Swirl, and so on. And the chocolatier has been happy to sort of lend his name and supply some of the chocolates. And whoever gets the most of these Easter eggs within the book will win a box of chocolates and a signed copy of the next book. And by Easter eggs, it's not just quotes from films. There are quotes from films. There are famous sayings by other people. There are references to other bits of popular culture scattered about. There are 30 or so of them. and obviously, bits of history. So that's something to think about there. So all in all, it's quite a treasure hunt for people. I'd be very surprised if anybody gets them all. I think I can only think of one person who might get one final clue to a historical reference. But I won't be surprised if nobody does. But it's not cheating. You don't have to get them all. It's a question of who gets the most. And just the fact that somebody's name in the book resembles the name of a sports person or something, that's not quite what we're looking for. It needs to go a bit deeper. One thing which I will mention in the first book, Fatal Trade, I think Donoghue spotted this, where in the first scene where the man's head is taken into the police station, quite a few of the police officers involved have names which relate to things you can spread on toast. So there's a Detective Inspector Gale, there's a PC Hartley, a PC Robinson, a DC Rouse, all of which make honey or spreads and so on. And Mel was originally going to be Mel Cooper, as in Cooper's Marmalade. But there are actually two other Mel Coopers out there, one male, one female, so I had to use a different name. I couldn't come up with a cop called Nutella, but anyway, there you go.
I like it, good one. You have a little hint of poison in this book of writing. And you made a good comment about the fact that it's very hard to make without accidentally poisoning yourself.
Yeah, I think to get hold of some of these chemicals, it is quite a dangerous thing to do. If you haven't got some basic laboratory skills, know about basic lab safety, some of the chemicals you need to use to get hold of them are flammable, and you don't want to breathe the vapors too much either. But something like ricin, which is extraordinarily toxic, I really wouldn't recommend anybody tries to extract it from the plants wherein it's found. You can do it with strychnine. Strychnine is nothing like as toxic, but again, you need to be pretty careful.
Is Fatal Dose going to embrace your kind of love of, are you going to use some of the poison bottles that you've collected?
Well, we have a very talented cover artist called Jane Mapp, who I made some suggestions about these. I actually built that mock bomb, leaving out some important bits, obviously. And she did the covers, and I will suggest to her that she might borrow some of these bottles and maybe put them on the cover. But we've got to get it edited first. I mean, the book it's in its draft where it's ready to go for editing, but it won't be out for a while, and designing the cover will come on at a later stage, assuming the publisher's happy with it, of course.
I'm sure I've asked you this before, but do you have a favourite poison that you would use if you were going to use one, hypothetically?
I suppose it depended on whether I wanted to get away with it. There are several examples of things which can be used in the upcoming book, not with too much detail. I mean, one of the most effective is aconite, which is dangerous at a pretty low dose. Again, extracting it from the plants where it grows is potentially hazardous. You can do it if you're careful, if you read up on some stuff on laboratory safety, but it is pretty effective. If someone's found in time, then there is treatment. There is for most poisons, actually, probably things like ricin and abrin. If you've got a fatal dose in there, then there's nothing much you can do about it. But with others, if it's still in the bloodstream, it can be removed by dialysis. Even with cyanide, you can treat that if you get to someone quickly enough, and you have to put them on some kind of support. In extreme cases with aconite, you need to put them on heart bypass, which you won't find in a cottage hospital in St Mary Mead or somewhere like that. So yeah, I mean, most poisons don't have antidotes per se, but there are things you can do to try and keep someone alive and until the poison gets out of their system. But with a few, if you've got it, you've had it, basically.
I always feel like people miss out the biological toxins a little bit. We all think about things like ricin and cyanide and miss out the awesome stuff like Botox and...
Well, yeah.
Retroid and things like that that are quite deadly in very small doses.
I think with things like Botox, the most poisonous material I've come across in researching my crime writing, how to write the science book, is a strain of botulinus toxin, not the one which is used for cosmetics, but that is ferociously toxic. You're really talking about millionths of a gram being, potentially fatal. The stuff they use in Botox clinics is it's much less poisonous and it's a lot more dilute. But people have died from being used, not particularly in cosmetic surgery, but it can be used in other surgery for relaxing muscles and so on. And there have been cases of overdoses and people dying of it, or certainly becoming very ill. But yeah, I mean, plants can contain a lot of fairly horrific things if you know what to look for, where they grow. And I know, for instance, where you can get a flourishing crop of hemlock, but I haven't actually said where in the book.
Someone's asked if your book is available in audiobook.
Well, I'm hoping it will be. I understand that Adrian, one of the publishers, is going to be narrating Fatal Trade sometime this summer. Although as they both had COVID, I think that's probably been put back a bit. But yes, I hope it will be turned into an audiobook.
Sam's asked how helpful you found other authors when you've been researching writing crime fiction.
I think it was talking to other authors, either helping with their own stuff or just chatting to people on various groups that got me wanting to write crime fiction in the first place. So the support I've had has been really amazing. And obviously, Crime Fiction Coach is a site I must mention, a Facebook page. It's a group of well-known authors, Steph Broderick, Susie Holloway, to name about, A.K. Benedict, Louise Voss, and various others who will do a professional critiquing service and also swap ideas and look at stuff online if people post stuff up and say, what do you think of this? So being part of that has been great. And yeah, obviously Graham Bartlett, who's an author, a crime author, he's got a very good book coming out. And then it's been very helpful. So I think I've just found everybody so supportive. So yeah, it's great.
So you did a book signing the other day.
Oh
Was
yes.
that local to you?
Yes, my local micropub, the Black Cat in Weston-super-Mare. A few people turned up. I think maybe people are getting more worried about COVID again. So it wasn't the crowded event which I'd expected. But yeah, a few people turned up, and the landlord has kindly kept a couple of copies behind the bar to sell to regulars who might have missed out. So that was nice.
Have you got any other kind of real life author events planned?
Yes, Crime Reading Month is June. The CWA are promoting that, and I'll be doing something at one of our local libraries, possibly talking about the crime science stuff, the mistakes people make and how to avoid them, but with also talking about how I became a writer. And I'll also be doing something with the University of the Third Age in July. And there's also a local book festival, a literary festival in Clevedon, also in June. So there are a few things coming up which I'll hopefully be involved in, or will be involved in.
I quite like your regular little tweets or updates you do about sort of mistakes, common mistakes.
Oh, yes. Well, they're quite fun. And I've got one coming up soon about use of Vic in post-mortems, which I'll send out in a week or so. But yeah, just little things, not sort of huge things to labour, but things people perhaps don't always realise. And one of them which I hadn't realised until what was I looking at? I think it's government guidance on DNA sampling, but you can't just go and walk into someone's house and pick hairs out of their hairbrushes and send it off for DNA testing because it's against the law now. So all these things you see on the TV where the detective sort of secretly pinches some hair or a glass of saliva on it, they can't do that.
Interesting. I presumed that you would have to ask for permission, actually. Even though I've seen it on the TV where they sort of take the brush and things, I've always presumed that you would actually have to have some kind of warrant or permission to have that person's DNA. You wouldn't just be allowed to accidentally take a sample.
Well, in the past, people have. And at one point, it wasn't specifically illegal. It's the Human Tissue and Embryology Act of 2005, I think. Can't remember exactly, but you can look it up on the internet. Any biological material, whether it's someone's blood, hairs, toothbrush with sort of cheek cells in it, anything like that counts as their biological material, and you have to have permission. Now, obviously, in many cases, there's a missing person, and somebody else on their behalf gives permission for the police to take a sample so that they can compare it should a corpse come up or a blood stain that needs checking. So that's permitted. But if you suspect someone's guilty of something, you either have to request that they provide a DNA sample, and obviously it's better to do a cheek swab than muck around with a hairbrush, or they have to be arrested, and at which point, with justification, you can take a cheek swab, as we've all seen on TV and true crime stuff.
So you've got book 3 sort of, I presume, mostly written because it's got a title and everything else. How many books have you got planned?
Well, I've got a sort of starter for book 4. Well, in fact, the very end of book 3 leads into book 4, but I can't say anything about that. Beyond that, who knows? You know, ideas may crop up. Plenty of plots out there which can be tweaked and modified. Characters have still got life in them. Yes, I think most of them have.
Are you tempted to write a standalone?
I did have a vague idea for one. I also did have an idea for an anthology of short stories involving poisons, but I'm not sure how well short stories go down. I haven't talked to the publishers about this at all, but it's just something that I've been thinking about. You know, I've written odds and ends for the writing group which I'm involved in Western, the odd competition and so on. But at the moment, I'm quite happy with the series. But yes, I do have an idea for a standalone, which has sort of various sciencey type things in it, but excuse me, isn't necessary from the police's perspective.
I'm a huge fan of short stories.
Right. I was very honoured to have one published in the Music of the Night, the Crime Writers Association anthology that came out in January. A locked room mystery involving a poisoning, which was quite unusual but entirely credible, because I've got a paper from a 60-year-old occupational health journal where something like that happened. So
I do like a locked room mystery, and there's some really entertaining kind of ones out there. Mike Craven, as we've discussed, has a really good one in his short stories where someone sends a gift, like a flashing gift to someone.
Yes.
And die of a seizure.
Yeah, that's a good one. That definitely.
I thought it was really clever.
Yeah, there's some great compilations around. Also, Penzler's got a huge, massive book where she's edited a locked room mysteries going back for many years. And John Dixon Carr is probably the most famous exponent of those, certainly in the sort of 30s, 40s, early 50s style. He's some really genius ideas for locked room mysteries and impossible crimes, all of which, as I recall, seem to be quite credible. Not everyone you see is credible, because you think, well, yeah, that probably wouldn't work, but Dixon Carr's usually pretty good.
There is quite a debate about DNA going on along the side of the thing as it scrolls up.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of discussion about what you said about people needing consent. Sam has said there's been some surprising things that she's read about DNA and genealogy websites where cold cases have been solved, and she often wonders if these cases are true. And have you heard of any interesting ones?
Yeah, there are certainly some in America where I I think there's slightly less data protection where people have posted their DNA samples, so there's the stuff there, and the police have managed to find familial matches. They've sent in details from a sample that's been collected, and it matches with it's a partial match. Because I think in many cases, if you haven't got the DNA of the suspect, or rather you may have the DNA of the suspect, but they're not on the police database. This is getting back to this country again. If there is a family member, then there will be DNA in common, and you can then look around various members of the family, have they come to the police's attention and so on, and make some inquiries. And there was a case where a bloke threw a brick or a lump of concrete through someone's window of a lorry, and the lorry driver had a heart attack. And they found a trace of blood on the brick, but they didn't have the particular individual in custody on the database. He'd not been arrested for a relevant crime, but there was a relative, and they managed to trace him, and then he was eventually convicted of manslaughter. So that's a familial match. When it comes to the genealogy sites, I'm not quite sure what the law is in terms of what access the police have in Britain to that, but certainly in America there have been some cases where it's happened. I don't have any specific examples, but I'm sure you can get stuff through Google.
I think it surprises me that there are some of those that are accurate, if you know what I mean, because I know that some of the kind of genealogy, send in your DNA sample websites will return results whatever you send in, because people are sending things like their dogs.
Well, whenever there's a service that can be offered, there'll be a con artist offering something that's substandard or just a fraud. So yeah, it can happen. And then you do, of course, get genuine mistakes in laboratories where people get samples mixed up or something. But there are reputable companies, I'm sure, which will give you something that's actually valuable.
Isn't there quite a famous one where there was a lot of tainted swabs? Like it was some woman had like tainted a whole collection of swabs so that when they were being tested.
Yeah. I think it was in Austria or Germany, somewhere continental Europe. The serial killer of somewhere, but I can't remember the name of it. But yes, that certainly was a case where there was massive contamination of that. There was a case in Britain where somebody was arrested for rape, even though he was several hundred miles from the site. And the reason for that is there was contamination in the lab. The technician had used the same petri dish or the same bit of equipment or something and mixed up his DNA with the DNA of the rapist. And this bloke, he was jailed for assault and battery or something, or common assault. But he certainly wasn't a rapist, and he certainly wasn't, he was jailed up in Lancaster or something, and the rape took place in Exeter. So, yeah, occasionally you do get these. And there have been a few scandals, and I'm not going to name any names in public, with some of the labs where there have been mix-ups, poor quality control, so that a defence lawyer can drive a coach and horses through the results in court. A lot of things having to be redone. So forensic labs are not fallible. They're private companies, say no more.
Karen McKinley has asked if you think short stories are harder to write than novels because they demand such craft.
You have to be very disciplined to get anything interesting down in a short number of words. And some of the competitions which are run, they're very, very strict. The Marjorie Allingham Short Story Award, 3,500 words, and that's your absolute limit. 10 words over and you're disqualified. If you're actually writing an anthology, then you've got a bit more leeway. You can go up to 5,000 in that. With a short story, you've got to be very concise in getting a picture of your characters. You've got to be very clear on the plot development. You can't chuck in too many red herrings and have people going sort of twice around the houses. In a novel, you can bring in more characters, more interactions with people. You've got to have enough in your head to make it a full-time novel. But I mean, some people are cracking good short story writers. Some people are cracking good novel writers. You know, I think Mike Craven fits into both categories, but some people do, like John Dixon Carr.
I think I always think of short stories as a good way of finding an author.
Yeah, it can
You know,
be.
so if you buy an anthology of them, then you know you get a new. You'll buy the anthology for a few authors that you'll know of, and then you'll discover a lot
Yes,
of like new authors. So my favourite read of last year, T.G. Campbell's Bow Street Society books, for instance, I discovered entirely through the UK CBC anthology. She had a short story in there, and I knew from that I wanted to read more.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm Hobeck my publishers did an anthology at Christmas, The Dark Side of Christmas, which had a whole range of different authors working for the same company. So if anybody wants a good introduction to what Hobeck authors write about, then that's well worth getting. I'm sure it's still available. It was a charity thing which went to a organisation which provides literacy support and books for people on the streets in Edinburgh. So it's a very appropriate charity. So that'll introduce you to some, I think, pretty good authors. But yes, usually there are Christmas anthologies from different places. I like them too. I like to explore different authors and see what else to read.
Do you have what have been your favourite reads of the year so far? I like asking people this question. I get
What have we
new
got to?
recommendations.
What have we got to? Well, given that haven't read any of Mike's this year, because it's what, April. I've read a couple of other authors. Silence by Jenny Ensor, which is a terrific book about people trying to avoid getting involved or getting involved in gangs in London. Brilliantly researched, very well told. Swindled by Sue Shepherd is another good one. I enjoyed that. What else have I read? I read that one recently. I tend to read quite a lot. If I don't like something, I'll give up. So it's a question of remembering everything I've read. I have to think. I'll get back to you on that because I'm sure there are
Sam
quite.
is agreeing with you that Silenced is a brilliant book.
You've read it, yes,
No,
yes,
Sam has said she read it, and it's a
yeah.
good book. I think I haven't got that many top reads of the year actually so far. Vaxes was mine by Sarah Gilbert, who developed the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Oh, I haven't
One
read
of
that.
my favourite reads
Yeah.
so far. And obviously The Botanist.
Yes,
Gonna
yes.
be
Well, I,
somewhere around there, I think.
oh, it's terrific, and I read that last year. So, well, the drafts of it. So I read that. Um, David Marks' first Hector McAvoy one is very good. I like David a heck of a lot. He's very vivid in his prose, his descriptions, and so on. And there's humour in there as well. But McAvoy is a terrific character. So yes, that's good. And Lewis Hastings, the chemist. Again, it's another Hobeck author. Maybe I'm slightly prejudiced on that, but no, that's another very good thing. There'll be sort of 3 books on poisons coming out around about this year. One of which is mine, hopefully by the end of the year. Mike's, the botanist, and Lewis Hastings, the chemist. And although they all involve at some point or another toxic substances, they are completely different. They're certainly not in competition. The characters are different, the plots. So, you know, anybody's welcome to get hold of them. I'm reading and quite enjoying something at the moment. One of Carl Hyacин's books, Lucky You. It's an old one set in the 90s, but it is so resonant of what's happening in America at the moment with the Trumpists and the anti-vaxxers and so on. It's chilling,
He's
but also very
such
funny.
a marvellous author, isn't he? I
Mm,
absolutely love him.
yeah, yes. I also read the Richard Osman, The Man Who Died Twice. I got that for Christmas, which is great fun. I enjoy that. People may sneer and say, "Oh, he only got a contract because he's famous." Well, that may have been helped him get a contract, but no one would publish it. It was rubbish, and I do like his books.
Yeah, I quite like his books. Sam has said The Guest House by David Mark was excellent. Karen says she's not read The Botanist yet. She must go and get it. It's not out until June, Karen.
Yeah, the Guest House is very good indeed, definitely.
I've got a copy, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, oh, it's a cracker, yeah.
I'm adding The Chemist to my list of ones, though, to go and investigate.
Yeah.
Sam has asked, she said she's read Mike Craven's Quick Read.
Yeah.
And it encouraged her to read some more. Graham Norton's was great. It was actually. I read Graham Norton's one yesterday. Would you write something like that?
I could do it if somebody wanted me to, yeah, by all means. I'm not quite sure how you go about it, whether they approach you or you approach them or whatever, but yeah, I'd be happy to.
I think they approach people, don't it? Because it's part of the World Book Night thing, isn't it? Like there's like World Book Day, which is a children's one, and they bring out the sort of £1.
That's right, yeah.
Books and give a voucher for them, and then there's World Book Night, which is like the adult kind of one, and I think the Quick Reads is something to do with that.
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah, well, I'm open to offers.
But there another one I think where you can go and you buy them because they're £1 and you might discover, like Graham Norton's one was great. I've not read a Graham Norton book, but having read his Quick Read, I'd be tempted to pick one up.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing about those kind of short, snappy little reads, isn't it? They give you something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a flavour of the characters and the author's style. And if you think it's too cozy, then you won't read any more. If you think it's too violent, you won't read any more. But if it intrigues you, then definitely you do it. Oh, yeah, another one I just read is Karina Swan. Again, another Hobeck author. Her first book in her series is very good indeed. Well, first book in the Hobeck series is well worth reading, so get hold of that.
Is this a different Karina Swan because there is a Karina Swan who writes like kind of women's fiction?
Yeah, it's the same person, but she's doing thrillers with Hobeck. So Blood Loss is the one, which I've just read, and it's a cracker. And I'm not just saying this because we're all published by Hobeck. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't mention it.
No, Hobeck have got some cracking books on there. Yeah. I think I do pay attention to the Hobeck Twitter because I often pick up sort of books from there that they advertise, and I go, "Oh, that sounds good," and then a few minutes later, it's on my Kindle.
Yeah. I did it's not actually a quick read, but a prequel to the Mel Cotton series called Fatal Beginnings, which was a giveaway to people who subscribed on the site. Which is still available if anybody wants an introduction to the characters.
Sam's asked what you do plan for publication week and day.
Sorry?
Sam's asked what you've got planned or what you did plan for your publication week and day.
Well, there was the book signing. As I think as I explained to you, Kaz, before we started, we just adopted a new cat who's taking a huge amount of time trying to introduce it to the new home and to the cat that's existing here. So that's taken up a fair bit of time, which otherwise I might be doing other things. But we certainly had the online publicity. We've launched a competition. We, as I say, did a signing, and there may be other things cropping up. But unfortunately, with COVID, it's still, I think, restricting what people do in terms of gatherings. I mean, I did suggest doing the signing at Waterstones, but it was felt that certainly the policy in this area was not to go for signings, partly because of COVID. Also, our particular branch can't open in the evenings because it's in a shopping centre which shuts at 6, so that wasn't on. So we went to the pub instead, which was nice.
As good a plan as any. You've been asked as well if you're taking part in any future crime advisor courses.
Any crime writing courses?
Any of your crime advisor courses?
Yeah, there's one. Graham set up one for June, I can't remember the date in June because we booked it sometime last year, but we seem to be doing these twice a year. So yes, there'll be something there. Kate Bendelow, the forensic person, the SOCO, is doing a session on crime writing at the Swanwick Writers' School in Derbyshire in August, if anyone's interested in that. When I get more details, I'll put something on my website about that in my newsletter. But yeah, if anything crops up, then I'll certainly publicise it.
I think there's a huge appetite just from people, not even who are authors, to listen to people who are kind of experts on things. You know, like Kate and you and Graham. Like, I know sort of in our group, when we run kind of expert panels and put people like you and Kate and Graham on, that people love them. They get some of the biggest views and things like that.
Yeah, people do. Back at the end of October, I did a charity talk for an organisation that provides food and education in Africa for local people there. It's called Mary's Meals, I think. Yeah, Mary's Meals. And I did my bit on errors in crime science and crime writing and that. There was a former detective, a former beat inspector from Avon and Somerset Police, who worked in Bristol, talking about his experiences, and a serving DI from Avon and Somerset, who actually was married to him. So the three of us were talking about different aspects of crime and police work and that. And the audience lapped it all up. They wanted to hear about, you know, silly mistakes people make. They wanted to hear about what it's really like to run a crime scene and carry out an investigation, and what it was like being a beat copper in Bristol in 1960, 70, that kind of time. So people do have an appetite. I know that I did a similar gig at the local Women's Institute, and you would think that maybe they'd shy away from some of the more gory bits, but no, they lapped it all up. So I'm available for talks, folks.
No, I mean, it's true. Sam's just said we love Kate Bendelow's books too. We do. I got gifted some Kate Bendelow's for Christmas.
Yes, they're very good. And Graham's book, Bad to Good, I think it's due out towards the end of June. Sometime in June is another very good read, worth getting hold of.
I will be getting hold of it when it comes out. It sounds.
Yeah. Excuse me.
It's got good recommendations from people who I trust.
Yes. Nice.
Those are people who you listen to, don't you, for reviews? You know, someone who tells you that they really like a book and you're like, well, they always have similar taste to me, so if they say it's good, it's going to be.
Yeah, it's a pretty good guideline. I mean, I think in Hobeck they have what they call a HART, advanced review team, who look at a manuscript and basically tell the publishers what they think of it. But then obviously you try and get someone to write some blurb for it. And I was delighted that Mike Craven recommended Fatal Hate when he read the an early draft of it. So that is praise indeed. So if you, for instance, find, I don't know, Stuart McBride Too Bloody, and he recommends a book, then you probably wouldn't read that. But if you like his sort of sense of humour and dark humour, and he recommends someone, then you would read it. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and no, I will also buy them from author recommendations on the front as well.
Yeah,
that can be a good selling point, I think.
Yes.
I've forgotten what question I was going to ask you now because we've got sidetracked by this. We've got lots of comments about people's books being amazing. Hopefully they're all going to go away and buy your book as well.
If they did. I'm very pleased when people do enjoy a book. You know, it's a tremendous fillip that someone says something nice about it. And some of the reviews on this blog tour that's going around for Fatal Hate have been very encouraging indeed. I've got one star review on Amazon, but it wasn't. It was just a rating. This was for Fatal Trade, not for Fatal Hate, which always puzzles me because, you know, did the book arrive damaged? You know, what was wrong with it? Or maybe someone thought it was an account of, I don't know, trade between England and Africa in 1862 and was thoroughly disappointed or something. But no, they never give a reason.
Can you give us any hints about what happens in book 3?
Yes, I've also already mentioned that there's a serial poisoner involved. It's still in Mexton, it's still broadly the same characters. But as is the case in real police work, it's not the only case that's going on. There are other things happening, notably an international criminal gang that's stealing cats. Not our furry friends, though. It's the cats which clean the air, clean car exhaust, catalytic converters, which are very valuable, worth more than a second-hand Honda Jazz. So, they are being stolen, and if someone steals your cat, you can't drive the car, and insurers just tend to write the cars off. So I think
Don't
that's...
they have some kind of is it something like platinum or something?
They've got materials like platinum and palladium, which are very expensive metals, quite rare. And with the current war going on in Ukraine and Russia, supplies are going to be even more restricted. So heaven knows what car manufacturers are going to do. I think that's why one of the reasons that second-hand cars are much more valuable now, because they can't get the chips, which are no longer made because of the war and supply problems in Ukraine, getting the necessary things to run the onboard computers. But yeah, that's a crime which I'm not seeing reported in fiction anymore, but I've certainly seen it reported in magazines like Which.
Yeah, it makes sense. Once people know, like precious metals, and it's like stealing lead off roofs and
Yeah,
copper.
there's a whole black market in these stolen cats, and obviously they find their way up to precious metal smelters at some point. But yes, it's a dodgy business. It only takes 20 minutes to complete it to say with a car.
I'm impressed that I remembered what metal was inside them. I don't even know. Shocking. So, have you got? We've talked about the cover and things, haven't we?
Yeah.
And book 3 coming out. Have you got a thought about book 4? You said you had some initial ideas for that as well.
Well, only how it's going to start. But that's a long way off, mentally a long way off. I've got to get Fatal Dose sorted out first.
I think you're quite remarkably good at writing good openings.
Thank you. Well, I did win the competition with the woman's taking her husband's head into the police station. But yes.
It's very... Are you going to be tempted to hide Easter eggs in book 3 as well, or is that a book?
I don't see there's going to be much in the way of a competition. I can think of a competition I will, but yes, there'll be a lot of musical references because I'm a great music fan. So there'll be various references to song lyrics and bands and that from the 60s onwards in there. So people can spot them for fun. Even if I can think of a prize, I will. But it wouldn't be a signed copy of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or anything like that.
Do you have a favourite band?
I have a group of bands who I like a lot. Fairport Convention, Jefferson Airplane, Show of Hands, Jimi Hendrix Experience, but obviously they're no longer around. I like a range of stuff. I'm probably, because of my age, more rooted in the 60s, 70s type of music, but I do like some modern stuff, especially electric folk, I think, that kind of thing.
Do you have signed copies available for people to purchase? Could people buy signed copies from you?
Well, they certainly can if they come to Crime Fest in May. But I can arrange that. Yeah, by all means, if people want to contact me directly. I've got an author page, brianpriceauthor.co.uk, with an email address there. So if people want a signed copy, as long as they're quite happy to cover the postage, I'm more than happy to send one. Yeah, by all means.
Have you got your book covers to show off? Just remind Karen McKinley of your book titles because she's wondering about the one with the lady's head in.
The first one is called Fatal Trade, which was it starts, apart from a prologue which sets the scene for something which happens later on. The opening sentence from memory is, the small grey-haired woman grimaced as she entered the police station, pulling a tartan shopping trolley containing her husband's head. She plonks it on the counter and says, "What are you useless buggers going to do about this?" And then the police have to find out why this man's head was there, what he was doing on her doorstep, and that kicks off a whole lot of investigations and skullduggery. And well, there's one particular part of the plot I'm not going to give away, but it involves drug smugglers, it involves murder, gang fight defending its territory against incoming gangs, and a woman who was trafficked as a young girl into Glasgow, tracking down the person responsible. And yeah, I can't say any more than that. But that's got 103 reviews on Amazon last time I looked, most of which seem to like it. So that's Fatal Trade. And the second one is Fatal Hate. You can read Fatal Hate without reading Fatal Trade, but it works better because it introduces the characters from the start if you read that. And you can also get a free copy of Fatal Beginnings if you go onto the Hobeck Books website, www.hobeck.net.
I was going to say, I think they need to be mentioned in order as well, don't they? Because there's a mention of something that happens, or a few things that happen in book one. I'm trying to sort of say it without giving away a spoiler, because
I think given
there's a young person that you mentioned who reappears.
There is also incidents referred to, but without giving too many details, incidents involving several of the police officers concerned, which, if you haven't read the book, it doesn't really matter. But if you then go back and read the first one, you might be able to predict one or two of the things that are happening. So Fatal Trade first is the best bet, but Fatal Hate would do as well.
Yeah.
And Fatal Beginnings, which is a free thing, does introduce Mel Cotton and some of the other characters, and it's not essentially read that at all. I wrote that afterwards as a kind of the suggestion of the publisher as something to give away to get people interested. So yeah, you can, it's fun to read, it's free.
But yeah, definitely go and read them in order, I would say.
Yeah, it's better if you can.
I've read both in order, and I think they do build on each other.
Yes, some themes develop, certainly the detective inspector that develops.
Do you have a vision for how they will end? Do you have kind of an ending for your main?
Well, like J.K. Rowling with the end of Harry Potter locked in a safe somewhere? No. I think I'll keep writing them as long as people want to read them. And if people are saying, "Oh, well, he's losing his touch," or "it wasn't as good as the last one," then I'll have to reconsider. But I don't have a game plan that in book 6, the police station will be blown up and then all get killed or anything. No, I haven't got anything like that.
Fair enough. Because sometimes people set out, don't they? You hear authors who've got a series and they set out, and from the beginning of the series, they know the end.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one way of doing it. If you decide that, and if you can get a publisher to agree to say, right, I'm going to do 6 books like this, and that's your lot, then some people work like that, and that's fine. Obviously, fans can be disappointed because they rather like a book 7 than a book 8 and that. I don't have that clear a vision as to where things are going to go. I'm not a complete pantser in that I don't sort of sit down with a blank screen and then just let the words carry me. I know some people can. So I have an idea of various things which are going to happen. And if something doesn't look like it's working, I'll abandon that and go somewhere else. But I don't plot things out on an Excel spreadsheet about what's happening, but then I do have to go back when I've written it and do a sort of day-by-day journal to make sure that you don't have someone who's supposed to be in hospital with an injury interviewing somebody, or in two places at once or something.
It has been, and I could ask you so many more questions. As we're talking, I keep thinking of new things to ask you. We could honestly keep going for ages, but we're at
Thank
the
you.
end of our hour. Um, it's been absolutely fabulous having you back.
Thank you very much for having me again.
And I promise when you come back next time, you will get a different host.
Well, okay, well, I've got something to say when Fatal Dose is out, hopefully. Good.
So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, and I hope I'll see some of your viewers at Crime Fest in May.
You should do.
Yeah.